Should we give it a little bit more time or should we start going? Awesome. We will kick it off. Well, thank you all so much for joining us tonight for our Alumni Impact panel to highlight the incredible impact that some of our Presidio Graduate School alumni are having across sectors. We have an amazing panel for you tonight, and I'm going to introduce our panelists in just a second. But first, I'll introduce myself. My name is Callie Green. I always say it's a great name for a California-based environmentalist. I am a current MBA and MPA student at Presidio Graduate School. I love it so much, so much that I actually became an admissions coordinator. So I have had the pleasure of talking with a few of you already. But please always reach out to me if you ever have any questions about our programs or student life. I'll drop my info in the chat later on. And we also have with us today the other members of our admissions team as well. Nellie, who is the Director of Admissions, and Jenna, who is our Admissions and Events Associate. So all three of us are always around to support you, and we're just very, very grateful for you being here today. And we are also very honored to be joined by our amazing panelists. So we have for you today, we have Chase Nelson. Chase is an MBA graduate at Presidio, and he now works at South Pole, where he uses his passion for sustainability and technology to help organizations enable climate action at scale through digital solutions. Thanks so much for joining us. We have Neelam Hadaf, who also graduated with her MBA from Presidio. And she is actually the reason why I'm here today. She was working on the admissions team when I was applying, so thank you so much. Neelam has the most amazing gift for connecting people, which is an asset that she brings to her many roles, including her current position on the PGS Alumni Association leadership team. We also have Sam Rubin, who has an MBA and MPA from Presidio. Sam really brings a cross-sector sustainability and innovation focus to everything that he does. He is the Senior Sustainability Advisor and co-founder at Mighty Buildings Incorporated, which is focused on solving the housing and climate crises by transforming the way the world builds homes. And finally, we have Shripal Shah, who has his MBA from Presidio. And Shripal has worked in corporate sustainability roles in a number of companies, including Sephora, LVMH. And currently, Shripal is pursuing a doctorate degree where his research is focused on helping firms develop executive growth strategies that enable more efficient growth. We are so honored to have you all here today. I would love for you all to introduce yourselves to our audience. If you could just say your name, the year you graduated from PGS, and then what was your pre-degree industry, so before you went to Presidio, and what made you choose your current role today. Neelam, we'll kick it off to you, and then you can hand it over to the other panelists.
Awesome. Thanks, Callie. Hi, everyone. I'm Neelam Hadaf. I graduated in December 2020 with my MBA, so it was like right in the heart of the pandemic. My previous role before attending Presidio, I was actually in pharmaceuticals, which we can talk about a little bit more. What made me currently right now, I'm not working. My husband owns a business. He owns his own auto body shop. But one thing that I have been doing is implementing a lot of sustainable practices. And he's been very surprised because I've been helping him save money. At first, he wasn't into the sustainability, bandwagon, as he liked to call it in the beginning. But yeah, that's what I'm doing now. And as Kelly mentioned, I am the president of the Alumni Association. So my job is really connecting people and just trying to make the community grow stronger. And I'll pass it off to Sam.
Yeah, so Sam Rubin, I graduated in 2015 after doing 3 years straight for the dual degree. As an integrated dual, which is really the way to do it. Before Presidio, I was actually working in interfaith peace building. We're doing for an organization called United Religions Initiative, which is based in the Presidio in San Francisco. And now, let's see, how did I really fall in this role? I mean, I think I get to blame Presidio for that too. I connected with my co-founders when because they'd originally done a 3D printing pen that was the predecessor technology to the 3D printing technology we're deploying in construction now. And when they'd done some crowdfunding for that, they'd worked with a Presidio alum who was at Indiegogo at the time. So when they had the idea for applying that technology to housing and the construction sector, they were looking for someone to help with sustainability, market research, and regulatory compliance. So they asked Kate Drain, who was the person, and she posted on one of our Facebook pages. So I blame Presidio for that too. So I'll pass it over to Shripal.
Thank you, Sam. My name is Shripal Shah. I was part of the MBA C6 cohort, so quite a while ago. Started in 07 and finished in 09. And prior to Presidio, my undergrad degree and most of my experience was in economics and corporate finance. And so going from corporate finance to corporate sustainability was a really good transition in terms of helping companies and other types of organizations become, quote unquote, more sustainable and better than they used to be, more efficient. And I've carried that passion throughout the last 10 or so years, working with a lot of companies in the area of corporate sustainability, some innovation, some growth strategies, et cetera. And so that's currently my area of focus back as a grad student, trying to take sort of that next step and help other companies of different kinds. I'll pass it on to Chase.
Hey everybody, my name is Chase Nelson. I'm a C32, which means I started back in 2019, January 2019. I graduated in May of 2021, so majority of my program, unfortunately, was through the pandemic, which means it was mostly online, but nonetheless a great experience at Presidio. And prior to going to Presidio, earlier back in my undergraduate program, I went to a very traditional liberal arts program. And so biology was as close as I could get to sustainability, and started my career naturally, as any liberal arts degree might, in IT security from biology. And so I worked through that space in enterprise IT for about 7 years before going to Presidio, but knew I wanted to get back into sustainability. There were a few programs offering graduate program degrees, and I was weighing this difference between an MBA and sustainability advanced degree, and this was a great fit for me to kind of satisfy both of those. After Presidio, I started a little sustainability consulting firm, which I did my own work pro bono for a while, and did some other things as well prior to working at South Pole, where I actually connected with another alumni, a C2, Pablo Pasteur, who we have 5 Presidians within South Pole on the USA team already, hopefully more. And he convinced me to combine my skills in IT and love for sustainability to help build their digital climate solutions group within the organization, which I'm happy to talk about more later. So glad to be here. Great to see everybody.
That is amazing. I always love hearing the diversity of backgrounds that people come from prior to coming to Presidio and how they integrate those skills into sustainability. And I think Chase kind of touched on our next question already, which is thinking back to when you were first exploring graduate programs. What led you to Presidio and why did you decide to enroll? I know, Chase, you kind of covered that a little bit, but is there anything else you want to add there?
Well, I think that there was, a few factors that weighed into it. Presidio offers a little bit of flexibility from a learning path perspective as well, which was really interesting to me. Again, this combination of a traditional MBA program with sustainability was super important. There are some more what I would call traditional MBA programs that are starting to build these tracks around sustainability, which is great to see Presidio as this early leader in this space. And I'm glad to see that education is rolling out more broadly. But you know, I ultimately, I just saw some of the great impact and the scale and the flexibility that Presidio offered. And I thought this was a really cool opportunity for me, and it was a great fit for me and my family to be able to do. And in fact, actually worked out really, really well in the pandemic. The modality for Presidio to deliver education. I had a lot of friends in my age group who were going back and getting their MBAs at the same time as me, and they were kind of scrambling to set up infrastructure that was primarily remote, and it wasn't working super well. And so Presidio had kind of this hybrid model already set up and in place to be able to deliver a really great experience through that process. So really grateful for it. But any others? I don't know.
Can go. So for me, it was a little bit different. I did not come from a sustainability elite background. I mean, I knew what global warming was and, you know, the basics of it. But so I traveled, I was working in pharmaceuticals, as I said at the time, and I was making really good money. But in the back of my head, I always knew like what I was doing was not the right thing. You know, like creating these medications for patients, but these patients can barely even afford these medications, just like the whole loop, and like just seeing all the waste that was accumulated in pharma, like whether it's food or paper or just anything, they love to waste things. So I just didn't feel right about myself. I worked there for about 2 years, and then my cousin was going to India at the time. And so she invited me to go with her, and I was like, oh, this is perfect. You know, kind of get to do some self-searching. And so I went there, and the first thing I did, I was in Mumbai, and I was staying at the JW Marriott in Juhu Beach. And I started like seeing all the waste that was accumulated on the beach. And it started really like getting to me like, okay, I understand that if, you know, the public of India is not doing anything because they don't have the resources to, but like, why isn't the JW Marriott doing something? Because they have all the resources. So anyways, came back, told my mom about all my, like, you know, all the trips and all the things that I witnessed. And she was like, that's cool, Neelam. She was like, are you going to do something about it? Or she was like, are you going to keep complaining about it? And I was like, what do you mean? And she was like, you know, it's a problem with your youth. Like, you guys love to just like march for a day or do this or do that or talk about things, but you actually have to put things into action. Not the answer I was looking for. But so my first search was pollution. And from there, I came across a New York Times article. And it said, if you want to change the world, go to Presidio Graduate School. And when I read that article, I was like, huh, what is this? So I went on the website and I started talking to a student. At the time, his name was Scott Altman. Some of you on the panel might know him. Yeah, so Scott and I really talked a lot. You know, he taught me so much before coming into the school about triple bottom line. I was just very blown away with the school and everyone that I was meeting. I was like, these people are different. Like, how can an MBA program be so chill? Like at the same time, you know, like where's all the suits and where are all these like annoying people? But yeah, I came here, decided to go to Presidio. Honestly, I always knew I was going to go to graduate school, but this was the only school that I looked at, and like this was it for me. And that's how I ended up at Presidio.
Sure, I guess I'll jump in. So I had starting like 6th grade, thought I was going to be a lawyer, and did poli-sci econ double major undergrad. Took the LSATs, did really, really well. 5 years later, they expired. Took them again, did really, really, really well. It's like 3 years into that, had fee waivers to some of the top law schools in the country and realized maybe I don't actually want to be a lawyer. And you have to understand, this is like 2011, 2012. So like all the people who had gone back to gone to law school in like 2008 had just graduated and none of them had jobs. And we're sitting on tons of debt. And it made me realize that maybe I didn't want to actually be a lawyer. Maybe I just wanted to be able to walk through the doors that a law degree would open up. And so at that point, had known about Presidio. One of my housemates, who was a friend of mine going back to high school in Michigan, was actually attending Presidio to demonstrate to his business partner that he was serious. He actually dropped out after his first year because the opportunity to start his business came about. So if you ever go to Driver's Market in Sausalito, that is a Presidio dropout who started that. Wonderful store though. But what was important was, so I knew through him about the program, knew that it was one of the first programs in the world that focused on sustainability and systems thinking as the core of the curriculum. I knew that they had recently started to offer a dual MBA MPA, and at that I was coming from the nonprofit space and was really, really present to the reality that too often civil society, public and private sectors are all trying to solve the same problems, but usually and too often fighting for the resources to do so because they're not speaking the same languages. And so they realized there was a need for people who could kind of stand at those nexus points and translate and kind of get those things moving forward. But most importantly, I had met his classmates, and I knew that they were the kind of people I wanted to be in community with. So it was actually like it was like June or July. So like a couple months after the posted application deadline, and I thought I was being all fancy and emailed Bethany Baugh, who was the director of admissions at that point, and explained that I was coming to Presidio that fall and asked what I needed to do to make that happen. Little did I know that they would have taken the application until the day before orientation, but still probably the best decision I ever made. Over to you, Shribal.
That's great. Yeah. So for me, it was kind of a, right around 2006 is when Inconvenient Truth came out as a documentary, and it made a huge impact. I was at the time stuck in a corporate finance job, just bored out of my mind. Most of my days were moving numbers from one place to another place, and that was supposedly work. That somehow made a difference in the organization. And so I was just completely disconnected from my purpose and what I really wanted to do. And so the movie came out, and it kind of, was a big deal at the time. And I was just, doing some work and looking at Hotmail, and all of a sudden this ad popped up for this thing called Presidio School of Management. I'm like, what is that? I have no idea. But I wanted to go get an MBA and just kind of further the work in a more fulfilling way. And so I clicked on the ad, went to the open house, met tons and tons of great people, professors, a few board members. And I felt like, okay, this is my tribe. This is where I want to be. This is the kind of work I want to do. And that sliding doors moment with the Hotmail pop-up ad of all things, it has been a game or life-changing kind of event for me. Is what I can think of what my life was before Presidio and since Presidio. And I'm so glad to be on this track compared to whatever their alternate reality is.
I love that. I totally resonate with so much of what all of you said in terms of choosing Presidio, especially the finding your tribe. That has definitely been one of the most special things that I've gained from this program. So thank you all for that. For our next question, I would be very curious to learn how Presidio prepared you for your current role and your post-career goals. And in this question, you can also include, like what kind of leadership opportunities did you take part in during your time at Presidio? So Sam, maybe we'll start with you.
Yeah, so Presidio, I mean, one of the great things about doing what I do, so I realized I didn't actually mention that, doing a concrete-free 3D printed prefabricated construction. So heavily regulated industry, lots of interaction between the public and private sector. So it was, doing the dual degree was maybe the best thing I could have done for my current role, because pretty much every single day I'm interacting with both public and private sector, and oftentimes civil society as well. And that includes work that I've started to do more recently on the policy side and starting to drive some embodied carbon legislation here in California. So it incredibly important in that regard, and understanding what does it look like to come with a new idea, to engage with the public sector, and it really influenced kind of the approach we took. A lot of startups tend to shun the regulatory environment and really see regulations as a negative, whereas because of having that MPA in my pocket along with the MBA, really understood the possibilities and the opportunities that working with the regulatory environment can have, particularly in buildings, which is one of the most heavily regulated industries in the world. And it's not something like where you can just come in and say you're doing something, because you're never going to do anything at that point. So being able to come in and really speak with building officials and meet them where they're at, and be able to speak to their concerns before they even raise them, and then be able to say, like, and so what are we missing? So as a result, we worked closely with UL to create the world's first standard for 3D printed construction, UL 3401, which was added to the International Residential Code as an adoptable appendix. Worked with the state of California to get our panels approved as the first buildings built under the factory built housing program that incorporate 3D printing. I'm doing a lot of work, and then now more recently with AB 2446, starting to create requirements and reductions in embodied carbon for the built environment. So in that regard was really, really important. And it also gave me a chance to work with 3D printing. My first foray into 3D printing was actually my MBA capstone. Me and my team, one of my teammates was a nurse at SF General and was really present to how much virgin polypropylene they were throwing out every single day, the stuff called blue wrap. And so we actually built a business model to take clean virgin waste from hospitals and turn it into 3D printer filament. Regrettably, there's not a huge polypropylene filament market, which is unfortunate. So it's one of the reasons we didn't go forward with that, but really gave me an opportunity to dip my toes into that space, which was awesome because I've been in love with 3D printing ever since I realized that Star Trek replicators were just atomic level additive manufacturing with energy modulation. It's also when people realize just how giant a nerd I actually am. But Presidio was also an amazing opportunity to get to try a lot of different things and really kind of step into leadership roles. So I served on student reps, including one semester as president, was co-chair of the International Sustainability Club, where we organize trips every year to traveling internationally. So I got to go to Kenya, got to go to South America, working on sustainability projects. Also got to one of the years I was there, we were one of the co-hosts of Net Impact, which is a big MBA sustainability conference, and so was able to actually design one of the tracks around nonprofit management and drawing on that background. So yeah, so amazing opportunities to really step up and kind of and lead in a lot of ways that I would not have had otherwise, and with great people and kind of great teachers. And I don't just include the professors in that. I learned a lot from my fellow students that really informed my path and really also helped me kind of see myself differently. Neelam.
Thanks, Sam. Your answers are always so insightful. Yeah, so for my current role, so right now my current role is that I am a stay-at-home wife, and I am also the president of the Alumni Association. I took some time off, so maybe some folks on the call don't know this, but during my time at Presidio, I always worked for the school. I started out my first semester as the admissions ambassador, and I did that for about a year while being in school. And then after that, I grew into the outreach and admissions specialist, and then I got promoted once again to the associate director of admissions. So the past, I want to say 4 years of my life were really really embedded in Presidio. And as you can tell, I love this community so much that I decided to come back as the president of the Alumni Association. But there was a time that I had to let go and kind of figure out what I wanted to do next for myself. But one of the things that really that I'm mostly proud of in my career is the prospective students that I was able to, recruit and have them come in. And I do feel that one thing that really made me connect with the prospective students was that I was a student, and we were able to have a lot of conversations, deep-rooted conversations about what we're learning in the curriculum and what we're doing and what it is on the student side. The community at Presidio is honestly the heart of who we are. I feel that even if you go, you have your own cohort, but you can always mix and mingle with other cohorts. So you end up, you meet so many people, your professors are amazing. They're one of your biggest allies. Till this day, I have professors reaching out to me Neelam, are you ready to work yet? I have this available for you. I have that role available for you. But I'm no, I'm just, I wanted to take a little breather. Self-sustainability is also very important. And I want to say it was probably my first time in 15 years taking a gap. And I've traveled. So I've been enriching myself and learning about other things. And I've also come back this semester to take a consulting course with Pam Gordon, who is also our Director of Partnerships, I believe, for PGS Consults. And that class has been great. And it's kind of showed me like the next chapter I want to take in my life is in the consulting realm.
Yeah, so I think for me, there's like tons and tons of different ways you can answer like how Presidio prepared me for the current role. But I remember going back to the early days of the experience of Presidio, and one of the first classes we took was basically principles of sustainable management. And then you take a leadership course and so on. And one of the things I remember from that was this idea of theories of change, right? So whether you want to change yourself or your organization or your community or society at large, you have to have some theory of change, how you're going to accomplish that. And there's a lot of kind of, technical and academic ways to explain it. But one way to think about it is, I don't know if any of you guys are Game of Thrones fans, if you probably generally know about the story for Game of Thrones. And you think about all the different people who were part of that story. You had people like Daenerys, who was all like fire and passion. And her theory of change was, I want to break the wheel, I want to burn everything down. Not worried about what would come after she was done. Then you have other people like on the other side of the continent who are just reluctant. They just leave me alone. We don't want to be part of this Game of Thrones. We don't care. We're happy where we are. Then you have other people like Jon Snow, if you know who that is. They only get involved in the struggle, right? In the movement, in the fight, when there's another existential threat that comes after them. And then you have all these other people like Hand of the King or the Queen and the Master of Coin and ships and so on. And they're more interested in like incremental change. Let me just push this thing forward just a little bit of improvement. And if you think about all these different stakeholders, all these different people, they're trying to affect change in their own way, right? They have their own theory of change. How do I want to make a difference in the world? And that's the kind of stuff you learn at Presidio, right? You learn a lot of hard skills of like how to do a job, but then you learn a lot of these soft skills of how do I affect change in the world? And in the long run, those are the most important sort of classes and moments and things you really experience. Because a lot of the hard skills, I mean, I know and I remember, but that's not what I carry on, 10 years down the road. It's all the soft stuff that you learn that makes you a better change agent. And that's the kind of stuff I love about Presidio.
Well, for me, I think any good
KPIs.
Yeah, it's a good question. For me, any good educational program, and Presidio definitely lived up to this, helps first challenge what you think about the world a little bit. And so entering into an MBA program, for me at least, that's the path I took. Instead of how do we maximize some sort of economic output, challenge the question of, is this economic output a good idea in the first place? And so some of those answers might lead you to believe that maybe indeed that is true, it is a good idea or not. But nonetheless, that challenge and introspective start in work is really helpful. Presidio does a lot of great work and coursework around some of those really interesting and challenging questions that are being asked in an MBA program very sparingly or for the first time. And then it moves into the ability to just try it out. So Presidio does experimental learning programs where you work with different organizations and you apply your coursework in operations or finance or marketing to a real live organization that you essentially consult with them through your period of time. And you get to work in a relatively safe setting to deliver a real project. And so you get to practice some of those skills, which ultimately is, of course, highly beneficial. And coming out of Presidio for me, I recognized how few people in the world have any sort of sustainability conversational capacity. There's a lot of interest, but people get really unsure about where to go from that next. We have a saying at South Pole that our biggest competitor is inaction. And so we are constantly trying to engage people in this conversation. And so when I left graduate school, I got a few calls from friends who were working at different places, and they're like, "Hey, you're the sustainability person. What do we do?" And they had no idea where to even start. And so that actually just got me going into building my own little sustainability consulting practice, where I worked on a bunch of small projects. You know, didn't get rich off of it or anything, but it was a lot of fun to be able to really practice. Any action is really good action, and helping organizations take those first steps is really an awesome experience for me. And ultimately, I joined South Pole as part of the goal to maximize that impact. For me, for those of you not familiar with South Pole is a little over 1,000 people. It's a Swiss-based consultancy, sustainability consultancy, where we do a lot of different consulting work. And it's also the largest developer of carbon offsets in the world. And so anybody who has questions of what carbon offsets are or challenges to carbon offsets, would love to have that in the chat. We, don't need to go down that rabbit hole right now, but nonetheless, what's really interesting is South Pole works with really large brands to deliver results at really huge scale and make really big differences in how they think about value chains, how they think about their emissions. And so to be able to take that opportunity and maximize that impact was something that was really, really valuable to me. And it's also really interesting, as just kind of a side note with South Pole, is there would be a lot of opportunity to just accept companies' money and just agree with them on how they want to do sustainability. And South Pole, in my opinion, does a really cool job of really challenging these companies and saying, no, this is not a good idea. And in fact, for our carbon offsetting business, for example, is in healthy conflict with our consulting practice. Consulting should come first to reduce all of those emissions before an offsetting program gets enacted as part of that. And so it's really cool to see that organization kind of live up to maximizing that impact in a real way. And so for me, that's an opportunity in business. And, I think there's great, as Sam mentioned, there's great opportunity for collaboration as well. And the business world is where I've lived in, and being able to maximize that in the business world is something I really appreciate and enjoy.
This is amazing. I really appreciate all of your answers, especially as, a current student, and just being so inspired by the work that all of you are doing. It's really amazing, and I really appreciate all of your insights. We have a lot of prospective students here who I'm sure are very curious to have their questions answered by this panel of amazing alumni that we have. So I'm going to open up the floor to any questions from the audience. If you want to ask questions, you can go ahead and drop them in the chat. You can also feel free to just raise your little Zoom hand and ask over Zoom as well. There's already some questions in the chat. So one of them is, I would love to know how folks were able to manage the financial commitment at Presidio, any scholarships, or maybe Neelam can elaborate on the work-life balance, since it sounds like she worked for the school while studying.
Yeah, definitely. I'll kick us off. So as far as the financials went, when I came to Presidio, I got, I think, like 10% in scholarships, and then the rest I pulled out in loans. Just one thing to keep in mind, which a lot of folks don't know this when they're applying, graduate school loans and undergraduate school loans are completely different. So when you're at the graduate level, you're not getting any federal Pell Grants or anything like that. So just to keep that in mind. So that's honestly how I paid for it. Have I paid back my loans yet? No. Thank you, Biden, for like increasing that at least. One day I will. And the other question was what, Kelly?
It was
work-life balance.
Yes.
Okay, so for work-life balance, so for my first semester, it was very challenging. So I graduated with my bachelor's in 2015. So when I came back, I felt like I was a little rusty. It was like 2018. So I took 4 classes, which wasn't the best idea, I thought, for myself. And then mid-semester, I became the admissions ambassador. Pretty much didn't really sleep, eat, or shower during that time. So then I decided the second semester to take it a little bit easier on myself. So I switched down to 3 classes, and then I worked part-time, and that was much more attainable. one advice I've always given to prospective students is don't do this program full-time and have a job full-time. I personally don't think it's sustainable. And I've seen a lot of students come to me like later on with burnout, and they were like, Neelam, I wish I listened to you and I didn't do both full and full. There are those students who like, they can handle it, and I've seen it and it's amazing. But you also want to enjoy the program. You don't want it to go by so fast, because once it is over, you're going to miss a lot of like, you know, things that you do. You're going to miss a lot of your friends. You're going to miss residencies. So for that case, yeah. And then also, 1.5 speed on audio on, what is it, that the Audible, that helped me a lot too, because you want to make sure you get to all of your reading, or you're not going to be able to like, you know, talk in class, like when your professors are asking you questions. But that was like a godsend for me.
Yeah, I can jump in. So I worked full-time my first year, though I did manage to set it up so by the time I like finished my first year, I was really working like 4 days a week, and kind of rotating that fifth day around for residency and things like that. But the reason I decided to stop working had less to do with balancing them and more to do with not getting to do things. Like I didn't get to go to Bali my first winter break with the International Sustainability Club, despite having gone through the IDEO.org training with everyone else and doing the fundraiser, because my boss like mid-November was like, I'm going to be back at work on the 2nd. I expect you here. I'm like, if he wasn't a really good guy, I would have quit on the spot. But so I ended up taking on significant amounts of debt, because not only was paying for school, but also living in San Francisco. That said, income-based repayment is your friend when it comes to federal loan. And so do make sure you get subsidized loans, and that you do not move them to a private holder. Like do not consolidate them unless you absolutely have to, because then you can no longer qualify for income-based repayment, which caps how much you can pay, how much you pay at a certain percentage of your income. And after 20 or 25 years, depending on the program, you pay taxes on the remainder and it gets wiped. So keep that in mind. Very, very important thing. And Biden's made it easier, as well as the public sector forgiveness programs around if you work with certain nonprofits or go into the public sector after graduating and work for a number of years, your student debt can get wiped as well. But that said, it not working was probably the best thing I did, because it opened me up to be able to do a lot of activities that I wouldn't have gotten to do, particularly ones that were happening during the daytime. Just created a lot of new, and made it much easier to kind of be just going with the flow and kind of going with where things were taking me. In terms of tools that the school provided in kind of helping with career, for me, both in terms of me helping other people connect with jobs, but then also others reaching out, and whether it's work I'm doing like for Mighty Buildings that I find Presidians that I connect with on that, or things that I do outside of that, my volunteer work. There's always Presidians who are, and we've got alumni Slacks where people are always dropping things. There's a great, now that we have the Slack, there is a great Airbot job bot that keeps posting jobs on the job channel. So that's been great. But then there's also some wonderful Presidians who, what they do is career coaching. Like Shamila Singh comes to mind as a great example of that. She does some amazing consulting work and has office hours and free consultations, and just is an amazing resource. And there's others throughout the Presidio network that are really like that.
Thanks so much for touching on that question. What tools did PGS provide to you after completing your degree to find a job? Does any other panelists want to touch on that?
Alumni connections. I've had a conversation with everyone on this call and this panel for just to connect. Paul and I have had plenty of conversations. Neelam was the one who convinced me that Presidio is a great spot, great friends. Sam has graciously taken a few calls with me to just learn about his background and work. And it's a small but mighty group, and people really, really mean it. And just, you wouldn't believe, literally any alumni that I've ever LinkedIn messaged is like a day turnaround. And if it's not, they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, I was out on vacation. Can we please set up a time to talk Monday, kind of thing. And so the alumni network is incredible. I think that's one of the great reasons to go to a grad program in the first place. But what's really cool about this is why I imagine many people are involved in this call to listen in the first place, is that usually that's hyper sustainability focused. A general MBA program has a lot of great people doing a lot of great things and maybe even a great network. But a few of us, including some of those people on the call here listening in, were at the Climate Tech Conference Verge in San Jose last week, and there were like 30 of us hanging around, and we had lunch, and people came up and got to ask questions and hang out. And so it's just a great group, and definitely leverage it for sure. And I got hired by an alumni. Pablo hired me, so.
Yeah, and I would also say, like, you know, the macro environment now, and should you go to school now in a year or two, all the way through 2030 and 35, we know there are so many problems in the world that need solving, right? There's no shortage of work that needs to be done. There's no shortage of jobs that will be available in this general area around sustainability. I think that's probably it's a concern at some times in the past, but I think future forward, getting a job or a career will not be an issue for anybody who joins Presidio or a similar program like that. I think the big thing is sort of finding within this big umbrella of sustainability or big tent, finding really your niche, what you really want to do, and then build a network for that, not just within Presidio, but outside of Presidio. Because there are so many other communities, right, that you would want to be a part of, not just Presidio. And it's sort of, but being at Presidio allows you to do all of that. So over the next 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, however long you take, try to build that network inside and outside. And then getting a job would not be an issue at all.
And I'd build off of that and say also leverage your experience while in school. I mean, the experiential learning projects are an amazing opportunity to get a chance to get exposure to different sectors, particularly ones that you might not ever consider, but which can also open up whole new pathways. There's also taking on different roles within your teams on different projects to kind of understand what roles within a company are really going to speak to you, because you might be surprised what you find out you really enjoy, and things you thought you would enjoy, you might find out you really don't. And it's a great safe space to be able to do that with minimal consequences and have that learning experience without getting fired, as it were. And so those, I think, and that's something that Presidio does really well. Given the focus on the experiential learning, given the focus on team projects, there really is that opportunity to step up and also to learn and to talk to your classmates who come from amazing backgrounds, and many of whom have maybe worked in the industries you want to go into, or have experiences in those industries that they highlight how you might be a really good fit in a way you never would have thought. And so that's something I think that it really does a really, really good job. The program and the community do a really good job of.
Yeah, I really appreciate that you bring up our experiential learning. I don't see any other questions in the chat right now. If anyone has questions, keep putting them in there. But until we see any of those questions, oh, actually, we just got one.
We did, and that's one of the questions you had on the list before too.
Amazing. So what we're speaking to experiential learning, what were some of your favorite courses and why? And maybe if one of our panelists could also just briefly explain experiential learning and what that is for our prospective students.
So I actually had 2 different paid gigs come from experiential learning courses. One was with an alumni, Miles, who runs a company called Sophie's Kitchen, which is a plant-based, they make plant-based seafood. And through that process, the marketing activity that we were doing, it was a marketing class, was to help market their company towards venture capital firms. And then after that, one of the venture capital firms that I found out about in that process to do market research, I reached out to them and they gave me some paid work, which was really, really fun to also understand how VC firms work a little bit and everything, which ultimately wasn't for me, but it was a really cool experience. And then additionally, through our finance experiential learning program, we did work with Peter Glenn, who's an alumni as well, who runs a company out of the Bay Area in Sacramento called EV Life, which helps do financing for electric vehicles, utilizing the incentives that you get to help you finance a new car. They do some other great work as well. And I helped, after I graduated, through the LLC and the consulting firm that I had built, help Peter and his team develop some new partnership work, and they paid really well to help me do that and get my feet under me as well. And so I didn't think I wanted to be in the electric car space or the plant-based food space, but it really exposed me to those things, made a little side cash as well. And it was just a blast to be able to learn about those different industries and get more involved, and help me leverage in different interviews as well. And so it's really a really cool experience and just a lot of fun to be able to put those skills to work for sure.
But what is an EL?
What is it? Yes. So more basically, an experiential learning program is it sometimes cycles on which classes, but usually follows the traditional MBA focal point classes of marketing, operations, finance, those types of things that a class you have to take, which of course Presidio adds a sustainability spin to as part of the, say, an MBA path, for example. But the part of the course requirement is to work with a real company and do a real project with a real outcome for them and their stakeholders. And so those were two of those. I also did one with another alumni called Grove Collaborative, or the company's called Grove Collaborative with Danielle there, who they make some great packaged, they've changed how packaging works and how formulas work for things like body care goods and home goods and things like that, and cleaning supplies. And they just went public, actually, and we got to do a kind of a supply chain analysis for them, where they source different natural ingredients. And so the whole point is to take the education you're taking in class and apply it to a real world situation with some stakes in the game, but with some real guidance and a friendly face, usually largely with alumni as well, to do something that they're really excited about, and then you get to put on a resume. So
Thank you so much for that. I know we have another question in the chat as well. Did you all enjoy school being mostly online and feel supported and like it was a good learning environment?
Did. So for my first year, I was able to, because I had 1 year where I was able to go to residency and everything, and then we pivoted when COVID hit. And as Chase mentioned, we were in a really good position with, I don't feel like we lost anything with learning when we pivoted to online, since we did have that whole hybrid model, and the students and the professors, everybody was very comfortable with being on Zoom and learning on Zoom. And we also did a lot of creative things like within the community, like to make it more fun. So like our groups, like we would have like check-ins before, we would have like fun check-ins, or like sometimes we would do like happy hours. So you're still very, I feel like even if you're trying to do this program online, which you guys have that fully available now, right, Kelly? Mm-hmm. If you do it fully online, I don't think you're missing that much of the component of the community. But if you can, I would definitely recommend to at least try to come to some residencies, because you still want to be a part of some things, at least like the first or second last residency.
You should come to residencies.
You should.
I'm going to push back on that.
You should
there's
also
nothing.
do the dual.
Well, yes, you should also do the dual. I mean, if you don't understand the public sector, it's hard to implement resilience and regeneration correctly. I actually hate the word sustainability, but that's a whole other webinar. But no, I think the answer to the question is yes. The online portions are amazing, and as Neelam said, really well done. And they've gotten better. I mean, God, I remember when we were using Zoom beta originally, and like playing with that and Google Hangouts, like so early adopters in that regard, and really find out ways to leverage that. But that said, there's nothing quite like being in person for residency for 4 straight days. 8 hours in class every day, and then like going out and hanging out with your classmates afterwards, and then showing up. It's like one of those like just really intense experiences that creates just amazing bonds. I'm and maybe some of them are trauma bonds, I don't know, but it really is like some of my best friends to date are still like 10 years later still Presidians. Like people I check in with on a daily basis or on the other side of the country, and a lot of that was relationships that were built in the crucible of residency. Because when you're like on Sunday and you've been closing out the bar, like you've been not only presenting every day, but then you go out and you close the bar out, and then you show up at 8 a.m. and do it again. And that's, some people do that, some people don't. Like there's space for everyone within all that. But like by that Sunday, like you've been through some things, like, and yet you're still showing up for each other, and like, but you're also looking out for each other. Like we had kind of an unwritten rule, like in my cohort, if you start slipping in class, we would yell, we would guilt trip you until you went home. Like, and then like you didn't get to go party if you weren't, like, so we were looking out for each other. Like there was
No
really
dance off for you.
exactly. Oh yeah, we haven't even talked about dance off. So we also have an end of the year, every semester we have a big dance competition between the underclassmen, upperclassmen, and the alumni. It's amazing. But so yeah, so I while the online component is great, if you can make it to residencies, I highly recommend it, because it's just a different element to it. Oh, and my favorite class was probably market failures and the regulatory environment, because it's one of the few classes that's truly a dual degree class. Because it's really looking at the regulatory environment, and looking at the idea of market failures, which are big governmental public sector stuff, through the lens of business, and really kind of recognizing. And so it really, like what I was saying before about looking for opportunities within the regulatory space, that class is a lot of that class is looking at how you can identify those opportunities. But yeah, you guys should go. It really is just like amazing people, amazing opportunities. And while lots of programs have kind of started to step up their game and starting to build in sustainability, there's no one that's been doing it the way Presidio has, and really centering it the way Presidio has, and that has the network of practitioners that Presidio has. As a result, I mean, we've got people who are running sustainability for Salesforce, Facebook, tech sectors. We've got people working in Cushman Wakefield, JLL, in the built environment. We got people working at the state level here in California. We've got people working in federal government. We've got elected officials. We've got people who are doing sustainability law. We're like, you name it, there's a Presidian who's probably doing it if it's connected to sustainability, resilience, or regeneration. And that's before we even get into the startup ecosystem that's come out of Presidio as well.
Totally.
Yeah.
I feel like one thing that really contributes to that is like the amount of passion all the students have. Like if you're going to go into this field, let's just remember that like your passion is what's going to drive you to do everything and give you like that extra, like sometimes this, like, I know Sam doesn't like this word, but I'm going to use it. Sometimes sustainability, like the field could be a little bit sad and it could be depressing. You're always reading about things that are like, you know, the world like coming apart. But at the same time, if you have that passion, I really feel like you can honestly make a difference in the world by going to this program.
Although I will make a caveat to what all the positives I just said. If you're looking to gain hard business skills, like become really good at finance, to become a finance whiz, probably not the right school. If you're looking to learn how to be a better leader, learn to be exposed to, like hoping to be exposed to a lot of the different ways in which sustainability and resilience and regeneration are starting to be brought into various spaces. If you're looking to have a chance to kind of try a lot of different things within that broad field, then it's very much the right choice. But I'll be honest, like a lot of my hard business skills came from being an econ undergrad, admittedly. Not to say we don't have amazing econ professors, accounting professors, whatnot, but that's just not really the focus. You do learn enough to be able to effectively manage people who are doing those in those roles for you, which is important. So it's really about teaching, like training you to be that kind of leader, that manager, and bring sustainability into that space.
Callie, we just have a few minutes left. I was just curious if anybody else has any other questions or.
Yeah. Well, if anyone has any other questions. I know that we have, our panelists have been putting their emails in the chat, which is so wonderful. And it's just amazing that, you know, we always have such supportive people here at Presidio. I remember when I was a prospective student and just being so blown away by how everyone was so willing to connect with each other. I know we only have 2 minutes left. Maybe if we could do one last question, like a speed round, like 15 to 30 seconds each. What was your most memorable moment or favorite thing about Presidio? Clock starts, Neelam, go.
I had so many. Okay, so my Ignite presentation, I remember that. I actually came in second place to Kylie Flanagan, which was a huge deal if you know who Kylie is. She's like the queen of presenting. And I was so nervous. I was so nervous for the Ignite presentation. But yeah, coming in second place to Kylie was like my highlight of my studies here.
I live in the mountains of Colorado, and after we graduated, had a big crew of people I graduated with come out, and we packed into a house and had a great post-COVID week celebration of hanging out with everybody and just having a blast. And so I guess, you know, the friends made at Presidio certainly was just a great time.
Pick one thing. Probably the International Sustainability Club, which I've been working with, talking to current students and trying to get it brought back now, since it kind of fell off during the pandemic. But getting to travel with other students and get to work on real world projects in meaningful ways is like, and just kind of get to see how sustainability is approached in other places is really eye-opening. Yeah.
So one of my lasting memories at Presidio is we had a class called Culture, Values, and Ethics. And one of the exercises was there were 128 values like in a survey, and we had to pick the 64 that we felt connected to, and then you kind of keep drilling it down. So all of us, all students took that survey, and the professor showed from 128 to 64, you know, what dropped off, what people didn't care about. And there was one value that all of us, all students said, this does not matter to us. And it was obedience. Presidians don't care about status quo. We don't care about following the rules of the past. We want to create the world we want to live in. And obedience is not a value that aligns with stuff like that. So I hope you come to Presidio. It should be fun.
Yeah, we really are just a bunch of troublemakers.
That was the most amazing answer to close us out for the night. Thank you to everyone who attended. As I mentioned, me, Nellie, and Jenna are always around to answer any of your questions or support you on the application process. I dropped my email in the chat, and we hope to talk with all of you and support you on this process. And again, thanks so much for coming, and thank you to our amazing panelists. It's been such a pleasure to have you. My heart is so full after this panel. So thank you all.
Thank you, Callie.
Good night.
Thank you so much, everybody.